What if an AI tool could train reviewers with their feedback? What if they could allow reviewers to submit feedback in a different format, in a different language? And there is so much scope for redefining what peer review is when we look at that feedback portion. And I think that if publishers want to be part of the change when it comes to redefining peer review, the review itself is a part that I think we have a lot of work to do.
Welcome to Insights XChange, where we explore the ideas, innovations, and individuals shaping the world of scholarly publishing. I'm your host, Nikesh Gosalia. Let's start with a fun fact. Did you know that the first recorded instance of peer review dates back to the 9th century? A Syrian physician named Ishaq bin Ali al-Rahawi was said to review fellow doctors' treatment notes to ensure medical accuracy. A practice we've since built into one of academia's most defining systems. Fast forward to today, peer review is under the microscope, evolving in the age of AI, data transparency, and growing calls for reforms. So how are publishers responding? To help unpack this, I'm joined by Lucy Threadgold, peer review manager at Emerald Publishing, someone who's deeply involved in rethinking how review systems work, from reviewer training and diversity initiatives to technology-enabled transparency. In this episode, we'll talk about what's broken and what's not in peer review, how Emerald refreshed its reviewer pool, and what a fair, fast, and future-ready system could look like. Welcome, Lucy.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's jump into something that we've been discussing for a bit of a time now, which is, the AI tools. And in the last, I think, a couple of quarters, we've seen a lot of conversations, a lot of startups, a lot of publishers announcing, initiatives in that, Lucy. So with the rise of AI tools and many other technological innovations, how do you see technology reshaping peer review processes in the next 5 years? And what ethical or procedural boundaries should publishers establish to ensure integrity?
It's a great question to start off with. I think that the emergence of new technologies and refinement of existing ones is going to cause a lot of peer review debates to come to a head, because we have to prioritize what aspect of the peer review process we want to change. And that means that other parts of the process will be deprioritized, potentially changed forever, or potentially forgotten. So of the tools on the market at the moment that are targeted at improving peer review through AI, a lot of them focus on research integrity checks with peer review on the side. So it's fairly common to see tools that will target things like, we'll check your citations, we'll check that submitted citations are real, they're not hallucinated, they're not retracted. We'll check authors and their identity. Can they be verified at their institution? Are they who they say they are? Are they experts in their field? And then they might offer some peer review element as well. It might be that they help find reviewers for a manuscript, but it doesn't tend to be the main focus of the tool. And that means that a lot of those tools are destined to help editors and publishers, and that is absolutely necessary. We need to check that the research that's coming in is publishable, that it can be trusted by people. We are in an age of misinformation. But it does mean that sometimes the review part of peer review gets forgotten or gets deprioritized. And it's rare that you see a tool that will help things like how to enrich feedback for reviews, how to make it easier for authors to understand, how to do things like send reminders, which is potentially not a very exciting part of the peer review process, but is necessary. I would love to see what tools can be developed or ones that are already existing that could be refined to help reviewers and authors with feedback. What if an AI tool could train reviewers with their feedback? What if they could allow reviewers to submit feedback in a different format, in a different language? And there is so much scope for redefining what peer review is when we look at that feedback portion. And I think that if publishers want to be part of the change when it comes to redefining peer review, the review itself is a part that I think we have a lot of work to do, but I'm really excited to be part of it. In terms of ethical and procedural boundaries for publishers, we absolutely owe it to communities to be transparent about research and how it's handled from submission when it first goes in, when you first let go of it, to how it's handled in peer review, final decisions, publication, and beyond that, what you can expect once the paper's published. Because sometimes there's some bumps in the road even after that.
Before I move to the next question, I just wanted to deep dive a little bit more on this. So I recently attended the SSP conference, and there were, I believe, 4 or 5 industry breakout sessions. All of them, no surprises, were completely full house. People were really eager to understand what's happening, in this space. I mean, this is just my personal opinion. I came back with mixed views. On one side, I felt everyone's quite keen and eager and excited about what happens in this space. But on the other side, there's a lot to be done. I think it might sound a little bit of an exaggerated view that this is another new thing, another, fad that people are thinking, it'll be completely disrupted, etc. And then we'll kind of maybe find some middle point in all of this. But in your opinion, do you think that, and I'm oversimplifying this, do you think that maybe in the next 3 to 5 years, there could be a future where AI is doing the first peer review? It is not perfect, but the output is fairly decent because we've trained it enough, etc. And then, there is a human who's checking, who's maybe giving more feedback. And that sort of a process, works. Or is it oversimplifying in your opinion, Lucy?
It's a really good question. And I think it is one that there is so much complexity to it. I think ultimately it will really depend on what researchers are comfortable with. I think, and that could potentially affect the viability of different publishers, how successful they are, their profits. If researchers don't want to publish with a publisher who does have, an AI tool that does a first review, that is up to them. It will differentiate different publishers and their peer review offering. We'll touch on this throughout the episode, but transparency is the biggest thing. I think there is scope for redefining what review looks like and how AI can help in terms of what are we asking of reviewers? And I think what publishers are asking, what editors are asking, what reviewers think review is, and what authors want are all different things. I think an author wants feedback. They want detailed feedback. They want to know what to change in a manuscript. It's not useful if someone says, it's got good innovation. They can't really do anything with that. I appreciate for reviewers, if you're doing something for free, you're doing a lot of it in addition to a busy day at work, coming home, you're doing it, and you are just given a paper to review. If you're not given any way to review that, it's a free form text, you do whatever you want. There's no real kind of structure there. And then for editors, they're then not getting what they need to do to make a final decision. So I think there is a really interesting part of AI tools that might be around helping structure reviews, but also being able to potentially speak to an AI tool and say, okay, these are the parts that I think are the most important. This is my review. Have I missed any key parts? Or for editors to screen it and go, these are the questions I was going to ask the reviewer. Is there anything there? And so that we could get really kind of targeted feedback. I was at a demo last week where a tool was looking at that was looking at not generating a review, but generating particular parts of the manuscript that could do with further review or further comments. And I think that that's a really interesting way to look at it, of having elements that something identifies as potentially needing more work, and for editors to decide, okay, do we need more feedback on that? As subject matter experts, is it something that is clear? Is it something that readers and a wider audience will understand? I don't think it will take over fully, but I think that it is inevitable that it will be introduced as some sort of standard in most peer review processes.
No, I love that response, Lucy. And I love the fact that you mentioned there are a lot of complexities that we need to take care of, and also different vantage points when you think of maybe editors versus the authors versus the reviewers versus, of course, the publishers and the interests. And all of that alignment, is not going to be just straightforward, but there is definitely a role that, AI can play. You very briefly touched upon transparency, and so transparency is becoming a key concern in academic publishing. what specific measures like standardized timelines, reviewer training, or reviewer acknowledgements do you believe should be prioritized and why?
So absolutely transparency is needed when an author is submitting a manuscript to a journal, society, to a publisher. They're trusting that journal with a piece of themselves, a piece of their work that they have spent a lot of time on, that they want to get out there. It's something that they need to do. We're all aware of the pressure to publish, but it's also something that people want to do. They want to be able to share it. And they deserve to have all the right information at the start so that they can make an informed decision on where they want to publish, where they want to submit to. Obviously, it's not always a guarantee they'll be accepted, but they should get that choice and they should be able to make the right choice for them. So we need to be transparent when we're asking someone to commit such a significant part of their work to us. And that's even more important at the moment with journals and publishers using AI tools as part of their screening methods. Authors deserve to know how their paper's being assessed, how it's being used by different tools, and consent to that, most importantly. So transparency absolutely includes things like turnaround times and having that be clear on journal websites, and so that authors know when they might receive a decision. But I don't think authors should use speed to publication as the only reason to choose a journal. But it's definitely a consideration. I don't think we can hide from that. When it comes to actually standardizing those turnaround times, I think there needs to be some nuance when it comes to different subjects, different forms of papers, impact papers, research papers, practitioner papers, viewpoints, things like that. And I don't think we should have a one-size-fits-all process in terms of peer review. But it does mean that if a journal works slightly differently, if it's triple anonymous versus double, transparent peer review, open review, single review, we need to be clear about that so that authors know what to expect. And also to call us out when something has not gone correctly and not to their expectations. With a lot of that transparency, a lot of what we see is if you're an author and you are looking at a journal and you go on a journal website, you want to look at the author guidelines. You want to look at what you can do ahead of time, what you can expect from your experience. And this isn't just publishing, but a lot of websites, you get so much information. It's hard to understand what is happening, what will happen when, who to contact if you even have a question. And if someone's policy is unclear, you don't really know what to do. And it can leave people sort of just guessing. And they'll go, okay, I'll submit here. Don't know what will happen with my paper. Will I get a decision in 6 months, a year? We'll see. So it feels like a small place to start. But I think providing authors and reviewers, readers with clear expectations in terms of your guidelines is necessary. And we have a really long way to go with that for most publishers. It's something that Emerald's working on with a specific focus on improving our guidelines to help support neurodiverse research in authors. So we've got a team that have done an audit of our guidelines. They have noticed how overwhelming some of that information is. It's not formatted particularly easily, usefully to understand. So they're looking at how we can make that information less overwhelming. We can make it better organized and looking at introducing things like a key term glossary for publishing terms so that we're not having as much jargon on a page either, just to make that process as clear as possible. And I would love for other publishers to consider that as well, because that in turn helps improve the peer review process. It helps reviewers who are looking on the site for the first time, prospective authors who will go through that process, and ultimately anyone who engages with the journal as author, reviewer, editor, or reader.
Thank you. Emerald, I know you spoke about a few initiatives that Emerald took, but one was where Emerald recently refreshed its reviewer pool. And was it during the peer review week, perhaps, Lucy? And so can you share what led to this initiative? And were there any surprising lessons or trends that you've observed so far?
This is one of my favorite things that we've done in the past year. So that's this time last year, the peer review editor team, so that's the team that I work on, we began work on improving our journal's reviewer pools. So not the whole reviewer pool that Emerald has, but individual journal ones, so working at a journal level. Every member of my team works across 50 or so journals, and they're system and policy experts. And we work to ensure that peer review process is carried out ethically and consistently. What we wanted to focus on was aspects of the peer review process that we were getting a lot of comments on that things like we just can't find reviewers. And instead of adding new reviews to the mix, we made a decision to look at actually what is happening in journal reviewer pools. What is happening there? And it's not surprising, but it's things like when anyone signs up to a newsletter or service, you sometimes just forget that you've got an account. And we see that in journal reviewer pools. Someone might sign up to be a reviewer on a journal. They might be invited for a specific paper, a specific niche. They might not have a relationship with the journal beyond that, or they might author in the journal, review once, change career. So we have a lot of reviewer pools that have a lot of inactive accounts, and that is exacerbated by the short-term nature of academic contracts. You could be at one university for 6 months, and then you're at a different one, and then you're at a different one. And in the middle of all your life changes, you're not thinking, let me go update my reviewer account on all my different journals so that they can reach me. And so my team did an exercise where we looked at reviewer pools, we looked at the size of them, we looked at how many people had actually completed a review in the last 12 months, who had actually ever been invited to review, who had automatically declined every time, so that we could get a real understanding of what the reviewer community looked like on that journal, and then compare it across subjects to see if we could see any trends in terms of research behavior, reviewer behavior, and help our editors. So we looked at identifying inactive reviewers and removing inactive accounts. So that could sometimes be for our really large reviewer pools, removing upwards of sometimes 50% of reviewer pools. If a journal was a long-standing journal, they hadn't touched this in years, there was usually quite a lot of work to do. And it's never about deleting people's accounts. We're not looking to delete historical data. People can absolutely then go, oh, actually, I really want to review. And it's very easy to turn their account back on. So it's not about getting rid of anyone, but just refining that process. So we ended up creating 3 different menus for editors to choose from. So they could do something that was high commitment, low commitment, medium commitment, working with a member of my team to decide what they wanted to do. So did they want to look at their keywords? Were their keywords up to date? Could reviewers actually define their areas of expertise correctly? Did they want to set up an editorial review board? Do they want to remove the inactive reviewers? And it was really popular. We got really good feedback from editors. It's something that's still ongoing because none of those solutions are things that you can do overnight. Some of them are purely manual, and I've spent many hours in the last year removing reviewer accounts one by one. So I've got a very good kind of curated podcast list as well to go along with that. But each of these interventions does have a benefit, and it's really good to be able to see almost a year on what results we have. On one of my journals, which is an engineering journal, I work on engineering and marketing journals, we have seen that the number of reviewers who decline has gone down. We've seen the number of active reviews in the review pool go up, which we were expecting. But we've also seen the average number of reviews that editors are having to invite per round of revision go down quite drastically. And it's early days, but we're also seeing timelines go down. It's taking less time for papers to go through the peer review process. So it's a real benefit for editors who are able to find good reviewers, and it's good for reviewers. They're not getting spammed by journals for working on loads of different papers that aren't related to what they do. And it's good for authors because they're getting feedback from people, the right people for that paper, and they're getting it in a timely manner. So I would say for any journal that is struggling with reviews, if they're struggling to find reviewers, I'd highly recommend looking at your existing reviewer pool before introducing loads of tools. Have a look at what you have first. Get to know your research community as well, so that you can find the right people to review. It's something that I'm particularly proud of, and it's something that will absolutely be continuing. We're at an exciting point now that we've done a lot of kind of refreshing, and now we can look at, okay, what new initiatives can we do? What do we do next? How do we engage with people further? How can we, and this may be boring for some people, how can we update our email templates to be more engaging? Which isn't necessarily the most exciting subject in academic publishing, but it is one that we deal with every single day. So if we can differentiate ourselves a little bit, that would be good.
Wow, that's amazing. And that sounded like a lot of work, Lucy. But, but also for you to say that, you can start to see the results now. There's improvement in so many areas. I think it's extremely encouraging. And I know that you've covered a lot of the aspects, when you described the whole process that Emerald went through. But from a strategy or a policy point of view, has there been something specific that Emerald might have implemented to enhance, again, the quality or efficiency of the peer reviews?
Absolutely. So if I look at our strategy, we want to differentiate ourselves by giving reviewers the best experience possible so that they have an easy system to work with. They've got clear expectations so that they don't have to focus on trying to decode a submission system. They don't have to enter different forms and things like that. It's in one place so that they can just focus on providing good quality peer review. So I'll start with what that actually looks like in the system, and then I'll speak about some initiatives. So all of our Emerald journals, when you're invited to review, you are invited to review a structured peer review scorecard, which means that it's a standard scorecard with key questions related to the manuscript they're reviewing. They're designed to hit key areas, methodology, literature review, originality, things like that, so that reviewers know going in what to expect. It means that also reviewers, if they're reviewing across Emerald journals, know what they're going to get. Authors know what kind of feedback they're going to get, what areas will be targeted. Editors know if they want to ask specific questions of reviewers or authors, how they might give even more feedback and enrich that, which makes the process easier when you know what to expect. We're also looking at, within the reviewer center, adding guidance. It's not going to be necessary for everyone to have that guidance, but it means that if it's all in one place, they don't have to open the review, go, oh, I need this, close the review, open a new tab, find the guidance, go back to the review. Every single one of those points introduces points where you could just say, I'll do the review a different day. So having it all in one place, it makes it easier. And I know that I would benefit from that. We're also, at the moment, Emerald is currently using a beta version of the Scholar One Gateway, which for reviewers across Emerald journals can see all of their outstanding invitations in one place. So it makes it easier for them to keep track of what they've accepted. If they're forgotten, it means that they know what they have the capacity to take on, what their deadlines are, and again, hopefully provide a better experience rather than logging into all those different journal sites. Outside of the submission system, we've also been looking at our reviewer educational resources. We have done a lot for editorial resources. 2 years ago, we filmed over 3 hours worth of content, which was my first time creating content, very exciting. But then we really wanted to look at reviewers and what we can do there. And we tend to package that around peer review week, just because of the amount of attention that's on peer review at that time of year, favorite time of year. So we did 2 things last year. One was myself and my co-lead, Shahrazad Khan, wrote a piece about peer review and bias in the peer review process. It's a really complex, really personal issue. It can be very overwhelming when you encounter it. So it was something that we wrote about how to identify bias in the peer review process, where it can be introduced, and how to mitigate it. So that if you see it, if you encounter it within yourselves, you have somewhere to look, you have some idea of what to do next, because it can be incredibly hard to deal with that. The second resource that was created by my team was a 3-part podcast series that we did with the Emerald podcast team, all around exploring what good peer review looks like. So every episode was with a different expert within the peer review process. So we had an author, a reviewer, and editor. Now, editors and reviewers had also been authors, some of the editors, it kind of overlapped, but we wanted a really kind of specific approach to everyone so that it was a different form of educational content, a bit more of a personal approach to hear about different people's perspectives. So we covered topics like how to give constructive feedback, what's the benefit of good quality peer review, how to understand good quality peer review when you receive it. And what came through from every single expert guest is that good quality peer review makes all the difference, which is what we were expected, but it's always good when other people say it too. And then after that, I was really excited and really happy with the response that got. And something that my team and I do is we regularly research trends in peer review, what other companies are doing. And I sent us down the social media rabbit hole. we started looking at what peer review advice was available on sites like YouTube, on TikTok, on Instagram. It's not wholly surprising. Some of it was very unethical, from things like someone saying, oh, figure out who your reviewer is. If you read their phrasing, think of who is an expert in their field, who writes like that. Then you can respond in a way that manipulates the peer review process. I was saying to my team, don't do that. Don't recommend that to people. Or things like, oh, even if you know it's coercive citation, just add it so your paper can be accepted. And it really lost my team. We had, I think, an hour of just being shocked and go, oh my gosh, if we as publishers aren't providing educational resources, there's nothing stopping people from putting illegitimate ones out there. And this is where Emerald has very much an educational first approach to things. We see something in the peer review process that doesn't look right. We don't want to go straight away to banning a reviewer. We want to reach out because these resources are out there. We know how easy they are to find, but it also puts more pressure on us and more responsibility on us to create freely available and accessible resources so that people can trust the content that we're creating, but also that we're publishing.
Wow. I think you briefly mentioned this, Lucy, but it'll be good to kind of get your thoughts. Balancing efficiency with fairness and rigor is always a challenge in publishing. So from your perspective, how does Emerald navigate these trade-offs when assigning reviewers or even setting review policies?
Mm-hmm. When we set new peer review policies, we approach it from a place of what happens if we don't have a policy in place, so that we understand from the start what is the worst thing that could happen, what are the long-term effects of that, who does that involve internally, our vendor teams, our external stakeholders, our readers. And we do that from policies that may appear very simple, things like all editors must undergo system training. That seems quite clear. Even so, we map out what would happen if they didn't have training. What would that mean for authors? What would that mean for reviewers? Ethically, what would that mean? And we do that for policies that can be more complex, things like authors cannot change their authorship list after submitting their paper. We've found this to be really good practice because by understanding what the consequences are, we can identify when nuance is needed in a policy. Editors undergoing training for system use, it's necessary. If you're an editor who's been recontracted though, and you've been working on the system forever, you might not need to go through the absolute same training as someone who's never used the system. If I look at our second policy that I mentioned around authorship, yes, it should be right the first time. However, people panic when submitting papers. If it's their first time, they might forget someone. They might panic and go, oh my gosh, I've forgotten them. They're my supervisor. I need to add them. This is going to destroy my career. It's fine. We will check, we'll get consent from all the authors, but there's nuance there. So in the same way, we know that sometimes with major revisions, the feedback you get is you need to do a huge bunch of this research again, and you need to do it in this way. And you might need someone from another person to join the team to do that. We understand that. We've got systems in place to double check that, again, get consent from everyone, but that's where our nuance is. So when we create our policies, we look at what is a reasonable accommodation so that our teams that are working with people, reviewers, editors, authors, readers, they feel confident knowing what the lines in the sand are, where we say no, where we say yes, and feel confident communicating that to other people. Now, there's also so much guidance out there. And like I mentioned previously, my team also do research constantly. So we are reading guidelines from governing bodies like COPE that frequently come out so that we understand where potential changes might be coming. So we know if we need to add nuance, revise a policy, we can do that so that we aren't constantly playing catch up, but so that we are part of those conversations and know what works best for us and the people that we work with.
During your responses, for the last few questions that I had, Lucy, I think just something out of curiosity, and maybe I should have asked this at the beginning, but how did your journey start into academic publishing? Because your depth, your knowledge, your passion, in this area is just fantastic, and it's just so inspiring. It's just very, very impressive. So maybe you could just talk a little bit about that. Yeah. How did you start into academic publishing?
I started, I think, like a lot of people, I've done a lot of hospitality work when I was younger, paying bills and rent whilst I was in university. I then did a master's in the history of medicine, which is a very niche field. And not a lot of people do it. There's not a lot of jobs in it. But I was very lucky to make some really good connections there. I was a research advisor for the Royal College of Surgeons for one of their exhibits. And through that, I became involved in things like research hackathons and looking at research in different ways, working with the community, looking at historical subjects in different ways, which I really enjoyed, all whilst working other jobs on the side. And then I started working on a journal called Engender, which is an international intersectional journal, but it's one where you are doing everything. You are doing reviewing, you're doing creating a conference, getting people on the conference, and you're doing all of these different things at once. And I was really looking for a role where I could do it just in one place. And that is where I found Emerald. And I joined as a peer review editor and then was promoted to peer review lead. And I've been incredibly lucky to be able to be involved in conversations around strategy from an early time at Emerald. I'm very invested in both with the work I do, but also the world of peer review, of creating better working environments. Just because something works doesn't mean it can't improve. And that's something that I feel like with the rise of AI tools, that conversation is happening and there's more enthusiasm around it. I'm a very enthusiastic person as it is. So I was very happy about that. It's meant I've been able to be more involved in discussions. And I think people are now interested in hearing, okay, what does peer review innovation look like? We've not thought of that before. Let's do it. And you can see this this is an exciting thing, probably just for me. There's been an increase in job adverts around peer review. That was not the same thing 2 years ago, even 3 years ago, 4 years ago. It's different. And it's been really interesting to see, doing a little bit of competitor research, what they're hiring for, what are they looking at? And sometimes it's really nice to go, okay, we're already doing that. We're on the right track. So yeah, I've come from a slightly different background to other people in publishing, a little bit of a research background, but overall, work environments, making those better, making them fairer is what I want to achieve. And peer review is a big place to start.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, thank you so much for sharing the background, Lucy, and very impressive. Moving on, from your perspective, what advice would you offer to publishers and editors working to build a robust, agile, and a fair peer review operation in today's rapidly evolving landscape?
I would say that while systems can do a lot for you, finding new tools is maybe not the best place to start. I think before you can introduce anything, you need to know what good looks like for you. For Emerald, when I'm working on peer review innovation, I need to know what's important to our research communities, what's important to our readers, our stakeholders, what's important to Emerald as a business at the end of the day. And without knowing that, you're going to make a lot of expensive mistakes and get tools that really just don't work for you. So if we look at peer review processes, looking at finding reviewers, there's so many different ways to approach this problem. You could set up a mentoring program. You could get editorial review boards. You could try loads of different tools that do this. They look for concepts. They look for keywords. Or you could do everything and just hope that something sticks. And that is going to take a lot of resources. It's going to take a lot of budget, which none of us have a lot of. And it's going to take up reviewer time without actually making the process fairer. It will be those people who are having to tackle us going, jump through this hoop, not actually making their day-to-day any easier. It's not making feedback any easier. So instead, I'd say we need to look at the root causes of what's making your peer review process unfair. Is it that you're relying on too small a group of reviewers to review? Is it that you're not giving people enough time to complete a review? Is it that you're bombarding people with invitations to review? They're feeling overwhelmed, pressured, things like that. You likely have access to that data. You have probably have access to author behavior data, reviewer behavior data, and recommend starting there. Look at what works for you, identify what automation would allow you to scale your projects, your journals, allow for growth, so that you're not compromising fairness for efficiency. I think there's a huge variety of resources on how to conduct peer review ethically. I'd also really recommend that people be part of local committees on peer review ethics so that they're part of that wider conversation beyond just their publisher, institutional society. You're going to learn so much more by speaking to people who do this every day, from learning what goes right for them, what doesn't go right for them. And it's also something that will allow you to think of new possibilities. I was recently at a conference and I met my equivalent, Taylor Francis, and it was really interesting to see what things we were both doing, how similar some of those things were. And I remember coming away with that going, I need to speak to my boss because they had a great idea. And why aren't we doing that? It's a really collaborative and generally kind environment. I know a lot of people who do peer review at the different publishers. I haven't really been met with any kind of secrecy around it. It's a complex topic. We all want to help it. And I would really encourage people to reach out to others, learn what they're doing, share your knowledge. I understand we all have to be commercially viable businesses. But there's a lot that you can tell others and teach others without necessarily giving away any secrets.
No, thank you for sharing that, Lucy. And I think you're absolutely right when you say that, it's extremely collaborative. People are generally very nice, very helpful. And that's something that, I've experienced as well. When I first moved here 12 years back, I had no clue. I used to work more on the author side of our business. And I did not have so much of an idea about policies, let alone business models. But everyone's been so helpful always. And obviously, it's a continuously learning process. But you just feel like, you can ask anything and, there'll always be people who will help you. I know that you've mentioned a little bit about collaboration already, Lucy, but how do you see collaboration between publishers, societies, maybe even the technology providers? Everyone, has to play a role in advancing the peer review systems and standards. Do you think it's possible to do that to a large extent? And if so, how can we do that?
Absolutely. I think with the advent of new technology and people wanting to create new technology or refine what they already have, there's a lot of opportunity for everyone to be involved in those discussions. Sometimes too many people, but it's about getting the right people in the room. I'd like to use an example of a recent product demo that I went to, which was it was a screening tool using AI that looked at generating a summary of the paper, identifying its aims and scopes, if it was suitable for review. It was a fairly standard tool. It achieved its aims, but what really stood out was the way the developer talked about the tool. And not just the developer, the other people at the company, including the salespeople, were talking about, here are the things that we have at the moment. Here is where it's customizable. Here is where we can change this. Here is what we'd want feedback on. If we do a pilot, I want feedback from the publishers. I want feedback from the editors. And I was very happy that it was a feedback forward kind of development conversation. But the biggest thing, which I was so glad, and I didn't even know it was something that I was almost waiting for them to talk about, was that they had some checks and the developer said, I don't know if this check should be done. I don't know if we should be doing this check with AI. And that was something I was very glad to hear. I think that that is something people are very worried about. And I think that that is something that we have to do. We have to hold ourselves accountable and say, what parts of the peer review process and publishing more generally can be automated, which parts could be generated, and which parts really shouldn't be. It's something that I think makes people feel more confident if they know how a paper's being assessed. It's good that we are critical about things, and just because a tool can do something, should it? And this is where also things like standardization of terminology from bodies like NISO is so important. But I don't think that it should just be us. I think institutions do have a really large part to play here. Some of the world's top institutions do not have policies on peer review. Their research integrity offices barely mention it. Last year, I actually got in contact with a couple of these research offices And I was asking about peer review. I was like, do you cover this in your program? What resources do you give to students, researchers, staff? And the response I got was, well, we should include something about peer review. And whilst I was like, yes, you should, it's very important to me, I was also, again, not surprised, but disappointed that it wasn't there. And it again goes back to that, well, if you're not providing it, they're going to other sources. If publishers aren't providing it, they're going elsewhere. But it also means there's no matchup for authors. They get different recommendations from publishers, specific journals, their institutions, tech companies. It's an unfair process. It's not consistent. And there's a lot of different ways it can go wrong. So I think working in silos is holding us back. And I would love to see collaboration that does include institutions, because at the end of the day, all we're trying to do is create and share trusted and hopefully groundbreaking research. Collaboration is probably going to be my theme. Transparency and collaboration.
No, I fully agree with you. And last but not the least, Lucy, looking at the future, what is that one change, innovation in peer review that you would like to see most widely adopted across scholarly publishing?
I think this will come as no surprise. I would love to see official mentorship schemes for reviewers to be more commonplace. They can be incredibly complicated to set up on submission systems. I'm fully aware of that. I configure those for journals on a daily basis. It's hard to get people interested in them. And if they're done unethically, they can exploit people. However, we need transparency. That's what we've spoken about today. We need transparency in the peer review process. And if you've never completed a peer review, if you're an author, if you're an early career researcher, if you're someone who reviewed in the past, you're not sure what it's like now, that peer review process is very shadowy. It's very mysterious. Having someone that can support you the first time, the second time, you just need someone to speak to, someone that can give you feedback on how you are reviewing a paper. That's invaluable. And it means that you can pass that on, and it means that you can improve that skill. And it means that you also are adding to an environment what you want to see, how you want to be treated. Reviewer 2 is a big thing. We all know about it. We have memes about it. However, that has to change, and that can't solely be publishers that do that. There's a lot of reviewer academies available to researchers, but mentorship schemes support researchers and research communities, most importantly. It's about fostering connections between researchers, and I think that that's where publishers could really help. We can have our resources, we can have our academies, we can have transparency about our processes, but what if we also help with getting people connected? What if we can help people with those connections at conferences, online, on journals, through editorial advisory boards, review boards, things like that? We can help people learn more diversely, more globally, and it will challenge in a good way what good peer review looks like. So yes, mentorship schemes for everyone would be my pitch.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you so much, Lucy. That was an incredibly insightful conversation with Lucy Threadgold. From rethinking review engagement to striking the right balance between rigor and speed, Lucy gave us a look inside the evolving architecture of peer review and what it takes to move the system forward without compromising integrity. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you follow Insights XChange for more conversations at the intersection of research, publishing, and innovation. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep pushing the boundaries of scholarly communication. See you soon.